All right. Okay, the following is going to be a stop motion video of me doing an example of your Color 2 project, which is matching colors and creating color schemes. So I'm going to narrate a little bit. The beginning of the video here, I'm choosing the center color of that swatch, and I'm mixing a bunch of different choices. You can see on the color palette itself, I'm not mixing too much of the paint before I move it onto the swatch, onto the paper, and I'm mixing lots of different options. Remember in class we talked about that's because there's a possibility that the color will dry differently, and also there's a possibility that I will mix too much of one color or another. In this case, when I'm mixing these darker colors, I actually do, or these complementary colors for the color scheme, I actually mix too much color. And so I'm mixing off to the side quite a bit because I'm trying to mix a small amount rather than trying to use a lot of paint to change all of the color, which will leave me with a whole lot of excess color. I wiped off the palette between colors and now I'm working on that lighter color. And I actually get it really quickly on this one. So I choose a complementary color palette, and now I'm working on making some greens and greenish blues that'll match. I move on to my next color, and it's this really dark green. So I use black and green, and again, I get this one pretty quickly. But I'm going to be mixing a bunch of other color variations on this green for an analogous color scheme. So I'm either going to go greener or darker or lighter, and I haven't really decided at this point, so I make a lot more swatches than necessary. Now that I'm going to start cutting it out, I make myself a little triangle template. And so I make an exact triangle in the middle, and I use my ruler to cut it out. If you're very careful, you can use it without the ruler. I want to point out, though, that if you make any mistakes on this, you ruin your template. You could use a pen to trace it out and then cut each of those triangles out individually with a ruler, or again, you can use a ruler with your template. I cut out all of the triangles for all of my color schemes and keep them in separate piles. Some of my color schemes are a little close, especially the light pink in one of the color schemes and the supplemental match color. They tend to look a little similar. Then I lay them all out and look at some of the options that I have. Now I'm going to get a clean piece of paper to mount it on, and I've decided on one of the ways I'm going to mount it. You could make lots of different choices on this front though. You could make different shapes. You could have squares instead of triangles, and that's why I include this little sample off to the right with a different set of triangles. After I lay them out and make sure they're going to fit on my board the way I want them to, I start making some labels. I'm going to remind you guys that if you do handwritten labels, you want to make sure that they're very nicely cut out and they're handwritten very well, that you keep it nice and straight. And I draw little guidelines on this page so that I'm drawing straight each and every time. And I also, and occasionally, erase a word and place it in a different place, like right on this next label. I write it down and then I decide to center it underneath. So I erase it and redo it. After I cut out all those labels, I grab myself some glue and I use a toothpick to put the glue on the back of the whole triangle. I make sure to get all the way to the edge. And then as I press the triangles down, I'm being careful to press all three corners of that triangle into the piece of paper and really hold it for a couple seconds, let it sit there. I don't want to put too much glue on the back of the triangle or the glue will squeeze out and it'll look ugly. And I want to be very careful to have even spacing for each of these colors. When I laid them out, I oriented the original and the mixed color right next to each other. That's why there's one triangle outside the line. That's the original color. And I glued down some labels for this particular example. I made labels and just named my color schemes because I wanted to and I thought it was cute, and that's how I do. So when I glued those down, I was also careful. You can see here on the last one, I'm going to use two paintbrushes in the back of two paintbrushes to really hold it down and press it down so that you can see a little better instead of my fingers. But you want to make sure that you're pressing down and really getting those pieces flat. That's what's going to keep your items from curling or pulling off the paper, as some of you have had a problem with. And then I label it. And that's it. That's the rest of the project. And don't forget to label and work neatly.